thanks for visiting the channel. I hope you're in good health and spirits. This is the second video installment in our How to Be a Mechanic series. Today we're talking about ratchets and wrenches. And since we humans are born both completely ignorant and broke, I won't assume you know anything about ratchets and wrenches, so I'll cover it all quickly. So the purpose of a wrench, a ratchet, or a breaker bar or pearl handle is to turn and twist things in the process of tightening and loosening fasteners or making some adjustments. They do this through different means, and often it's just personal preference which tool to use in any given circumstance. But there are guidelines which I will share with you. So every tool has a purpose and a drawback. So the drawback to wrenches, for instance, is they're slow. And under high torque, open-end wrenches can spread at their open end and will round off fasteners since they only contact two flats on the bolt. More accurately, two corners on the bolt. So only use the open end with caution and never tighten or loosen if another tool will do. Ratchets are the fastest hand-powered tool in the wrench family. You may hear people call them socket wrenches. Mechanics don't call them that though, so don't call them socket wrenches in front of other mechanics unless you want to experience the ridicule that will surely follow. Ratchets have a weak point, the ratcheting mechanism. If you're standing on, hanging on, or reaching for a cheater pipe, you don't need to use the ratchet. You need a long breaker bar. You will break your ratchet if you insist on abusing it. I have broken several breaker bars on stubborn axle bolts, so they will also twist apart with too much torque, but breaker bars will handle much more torque than the same size ratchet. You may ask, if the tool man's going to replace it under lifetime warranty, what do you care if you break a tool? Well, I don't break tools often, but when I do, my tool man rarely has the exact one to swap out. So this often means weeks without my tool, and often it feels like I'm missing an arm while working. And working around problems with other tools can be a pain. Similar to, say, push starting your car each day to get to work. It's doable, but very inconvenient. It took me a couple of years turning wrenches before I learned the proper way to grip a wrench or a ratchet in a way that didn't result in cuts and gashes to my hand or ripped off fingernails when a bolt releases, breaks off, or a tool fails. I've hurt my hands in so many ways that I've learned almost every way to hurt myself, and how not to grip tools in those ways anymore. Once you gain skills with hand tools, you shouldn't have to deal with frequent hand injuries. There's truth to the phrase, busted knuckles. It's a rite of passage for all mechanics who turn wrenches for a living. My advice is to just try to grow out of that phase while you still have all the fingers you started with. Wrenches. There are many types and shapes of wrenches, available in as many combinations of shape, size, and purpose as the mind can imagine. Long wrenches can apply lots of torque, and short wrenches can't. The most common wrench is the combination wrench, with a 12-point box end. They're called combination wrenches because they have an open end and a box end. There's a slight offset to these wrenches to give your fingers room to grip the wrench without scraping on the work. It's a pretty refined design and a staple tool for mechanics. For nuts on lines, like brake lines, hydraulic lines, and fuel lines, they make line wrenches. They are an open end, but their design lets them grab more than two flats on the nut and won't damage the nut. There are even ratcheting line wrenches. I have the two sizes I need for cars that I work on. Adjustable wrenches are handy, but definitely not for situations requiring torque. As mentioned before, the open end spreads and can damage fasteners. I would use them for holding nuts on the other end of a bolt while loosening, or something else that doesn't require much torque. Also useful when setting the preload on an axle nut where roller bearings are used. The adjustable is the ideal tool for that job. The box end of the wrench is the strong end, and the 6-point is the strongest type of box end. You may ask, why then do they make 12 points? Because we need 12 points for when space is limited to swing a wrench. You can turn a bolt in half the free area with a 12-point that you could with an identical 6-point. There are also offset wrenches for bolts near obstructions, ratcheting wrenches for quick removal, and even ratcheting offset wrenches for times you need that. As far as ratchets, I've had a few ratchets in my career. I would say about 15. And I really take care of my tools, never abusing them. Ratchets come in a 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, 1/2 inch, and even larger. The advantage of a quarter drive ratchet is they fit into tight areas where larger drives and sockets would never fit. The drawback of 1/4 inch is that they're very weak compared to larger drives. 8mm or 5/16 is about the biggest fastener you want to tighten or loosen with a 1/4 inch, especially if using a universal or a wobble socket. 3/8 ratchets are normally good to about 100 foot-pounds of torque, but 85 is the most I subject my 3/8 ratchets to. Half-inch ratchets are generally good to about 250 foot-pounds. That's about the largest we need on Volkswagen and Audi, but there are even larger ratchets that are 3/4 and 1 inch. Those are for trucks and heavy equipment. I have one 3/4 ratchet that I was given by a friend who found it under an old house. I don't use it, but it's comforting to have if I need it. My go-to ratchet is a new 12-inch long, 3/8 inch breakback snap-on with the latest fine-tooth head. I recently traded up from the last model they made about 5 years ago. I love using breakback ratchets. They allow your hand to be at the same plane as the fastener. This counters the tendency of a socket to cam out or lean out of the fastener. This prevents stripping of heads of fasteners and causing excess wear to sockets. It's much better. And my advice, if you're buying a breakback ratchet, don't buy the kind with a latching mechanism that holds the angle for the handle. There's a feel to using a breakback, like riding a bike. The latching mechanisms will wear out and constantly lock when you don't want it to, once there's a little wear. And it will nag you like some busybody relative that always thinks they know better than you. So you do what you want when you're buying a breakback ratchet. I'm just trying to save you from buyer's remorse. Breaker bars are strong, but I only use them for final tightening or breaking large loose stuck fasteners. The drawback on breaker bars is they're slow to use when you're using them to completely remove a fastener. Sockets. Sockets are also widely varied. You can usually find sockets in any combination of drive size, fastener type, deep, shallow, 6-point, 12-point torques, triple square, Allen, metric, English, wobble, U-joint, and in heavy-duty versions for use with impact guns. Between loss and theft, new car models, and new skills you gain, you'll be happily buying sockets for the rest of your life. And I find that I get a little more than excited about a newly developed socket that simplifies the job that I do. So power ratchets. In my early days, we only had pneumatic tools. These were loud air ratchets and all kinds of loud impact guns. Pistols, butterflies, and even a certain type of right angle impact. And these days, I imagine 95% of the power tools that professional mechanics buy are battery powered. It's quieter, more controllable, infinite trigger speed, and the shops don't quite sound the same now. You used to be able to hear a pneumatic ratchet a block away. There was no mistaking you were walking near a shop. In these days, if you didn't play the TV or the radio, the shop would be as quiet as a funeral home. And these days, an air hose in our shop is mostly used for blowing things across the floor or drying apart, or running a vacuum pump. Speaking of air hose, that reminds me of a story. Back when Dad and I were running our tiny little 2-bay shop in a rented storage unit, I would bring my dog Buddy to the shop each day. He was a lab and chow mix and a handsome fella, and I found him as a stray in my mother-in-law's neighborhood. When he was at work, we would tether him to the shop to keep him out of the street. He was always comfortable and got lots of attention during the day. But that stubborn little joker loved to chew. He chewed the cables off the back of my TV at home, speaker wires, all the stuff. He would chew it. One day in the shop, we were both busy fixing cars. Out of nowhere, we heard a loud hissing noise. Buddy had chewed the air hose while we were using it, not 3 feet from either of us. I had to get several splice kits to keep on hand for the occasions when he chewed our hose. I finally broke his habit after he chewed the coax cable for the TV in our living room for the 5th time. I cut 6 feet of the ruined cable and made a long leash that he would drag around for 2 weeks. He would lay on it, trip on it, he'd get it snagged under tires and baseboard trim, that kind of thing. He didn't chew that cable the whole 2 weeks he was wearing it, and after I took it off, he never chewed anything of mine again. And he was a very well-trained dog and a great friend for years, and I missed that little knucklehead. My dad, Norman, was a real dog lover. No matter how stinky the dog was, my dad would always give a dog a very thorough pet and rub. Sometimes I won't even pet my own dogs when they reek. And I'm talking eye-watering doggy BO fumes. I usually warn my dad that my dogs stink, is to watch out, his hands would be nasty. And he'd always tell me I was silly and that all dogs smell. So either his nose had left the chat or he really, really just loved dogs. Okay, well that's all for this video. So I'm sorry it's been a while since the last video. I'll do better at making the time. So please hit the like button so the algorithm can help other aspiring mechanics find our content. And please consider subscribing. We're very close to the benchmark for monetization and maybe getting some small income from the channel. So until next time, I'm Rick with Wolfsburg Tech.